Welcome back to season 4 of
A Couple of Multiples.
The Reality of Dissociative Identity Disorder. Did you know that according to a recent Harvard study, 93% of people living with DID are initially misdiagnosed by mental health professionals? That's a staggering statistic, and it's exactly why we're here.
This season, we're diving deep into clinical interventions. What actually helps when it comes to recognizing and treating dissociative disorders? Whether you're a mental health provider, a supporter, or someone navigating life with multiplicity, this season is for you.
Thank you for being here. Please share this episode with a friend, your therapist, psychiatrist, or colleague. Together, we can help improve access to accurate diagnoses and effective, compassionate care.
And most importantly, remember that every system is different. What works for one may not work for another, and that's okay. Your journey is valid, your healing is real, and we're so glad you're hanging out with
A Couple of Multiples. This episode is brought to you by Donna Earle, a licensed professional counselor and certified clinical trauma professional.
She's the founder of To Life Counseling in Southlake, Texas, where she helps individuals ages 17 and up heal trauma, navigate identity, and reclaim inner peace. Her trauma-informed approach includes EMDR, parts work, strengths-based therapy, TBRI, and CBT.
She's passionate about honoring the resilience of the human spirit, one story at a time. Today's episode is brought to you by
Healing Selves Therapeutics, PLLC, a mental health practice located in North Carolina, specializing in the treatment of dissociative disorders and trauma. Healing Selves is committed to serving the plural population through the utilization of EMDR, clinical hypnosis, expressive arts therapy, and other evidence-based practices.
Healing Selves was established in 2019 and currently serves North Carolina and Florida. We are committed to extending accessibility and currently accept most commercial insurances, Medicaid, and Medicare.
Welcome to another revolutionary episode with Drew
and Garden System,
A Couple of Multiples.
The reality of dissociative identity disorder. Today, we have Reverend Karla Fleshman with us to talk about her contributions in the upcoming book, Queering EMDR Therapy, edited by Roshni Chabra LMFT, and with a foreword by Dr. Jamie Marich. Identity intersections with gender and sexual orientation have an added layer of complexity when one lives with dissociative identity disorder, and we look forward to unraveling these topics with Reverend Karla.
Reverend Karla Fleshman LCSW, MDiv, they, she, has been an advocate for justice movement since middle school, marching with Quakers for Peace before coming out in the early 90s, protesting with ACT UP and Lesbian Avengers, and culminating with Soul Force actions advocating against spiritual violence toward LGBTQ folks in the 2000s. They are a contributor in Understanding and Dealing with Violence, a Multicultural Approach, Wallace and Carter, 2003. They are the owner, clinical director of Transitions Delaware, a private group practice which centers the experiences of LGBTQ folks. They earned their MDiv from Columbia Theological Seminary, 1999, and their MSW from the University of Maryland School of Social Work, 1991.
They are EMDR certified with an advanced certification in dissociation studies for EMDR therapists from ICM, and are also an EMDRIA consultant in training centering LGBTQ+ spirituality and dissociative experiences. When they step away from clinical training and consultations, they enjoy hiking with their spouse, creating Lego builds, and centering their energy with their understanding of the divine through yoga and meditation. Welcome, Reverend Karla Fleshman. Thank you for joining us today.
Yay! It's so good to be with you.
Fantastic. Yes. So, how did you come to be a part of the book Queering EMDR Therapy?
Well, let me give a little nod to GTEP, from there and then to here and now. November 10th, 2020, I got diagnosed with breast cancer, during a pandemic, a week after an election where we weren't sure the results. And 3 weeks later, I was EMDR certified. So they've been together since day one in this journey. I was in the breast cancer surgeon's office, and afterwards, my wife and I went for a walk in the woods, and I started to EMDR myself because it seemed like the logical thing to do. And it brought up an ab reaction and some experiences that, really bilateral stimulation works. And as my wife and I were leaving the woods, I said, someday I think I'm going to write a book called The Forgotten Parts of Me. Funnily enough, November 10th, 2022, 2 years to the date of the diagnosis, I had a major ass trauma trigger in the breast surgeon's office, which pretty much took the amnesic barrier and ripped it away, revealing early childhood trauma experiences that I had basically blocked for 50 years. So I spent the next 2.5 years kind of getting to know these parts, which led to here and now being a contributing author of The Forgotten Parts of Me, a clinician's journey through breast cancer and early childhood trauma. If you're going to go through it all, why not write about it?
Agreed.
Yes.
Yeah. So, make purpose out of it. The chapter interweaves LGBTQ, dissociative experiences, and spirituality through the 8 phases of EMDR. The book is an amazing group of queer EMDR certified contributors, centering their lived experience and balancing evidence-based practices. And so I'm very grateful for Roshni and Jamie in picking my proposal to be a part of it. And while I'm at it, I'm also really grateful for the Transitions Delaware team, my group practice. It's a great group of people that have been supportive the whole way through the journey. And grateful for you twos for inviting me on here. And just also grateful for my fabulous wife. We just celebrated 20 years together.
Ooh,
Oh,
congratulations.
There's a lot of contributing factors to how I got in the book, and there you go.
Wow.
It's an incredible journey. I really thoroughly enjoyed reading that, your
me
contribution.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. So would you be willing to talk about how coming out as a member of the LGBT plus community affected your self-esteem and your life in general?
Sure. Well, trauma, as we know, happens in relationship breaches. Healing happens in relationship repair. There was a transtastic therapist said to me a month before the 2024 election. They said, you can't be transgender or gender expansive in America without experiencing trauma. And they're so right. It can feel particularly dangerous in red zones right now. Survival may feel like you're sitting at a dumpster fire, floating downstream in a torrential storm, yelling, I'm fine, I'm fine. Which kind of is like how it felt growing up in a place that I call Pennsylvania, also known as Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It really, in the 70s and 80s, felt very rural and very small and very not queer affirming. When I started my practice focusing on LGBTQ folks, I read Joe Court's book, LGBTQ Clients in Therapy. And he framed out a chapter on trauma from growing up LGBTQ in America. And this is kind of my summary. And whenever I share this summary with clients that I get started with, or with queer folks who attend trainings that I do, pretty consistently everyone's like, that's me, that's me, that's me. This is how Joe sums it up. Knowing at a young age you're different before knowing the words LGBTQ. Pretending to be who you aren't, trying to fit into the socially constructed binary narratives, cisgender, heterosexual narratives. Because messages from family and community highlight your existence as flawed based upon who you are and who you like or love. Left without a safe mentor or a coach to counter the cisgender heterosexual norm, self-hatred and shame begins to grow within the inner psyche. The child is left alone, fearing abandonment from those they long to be loved by, often leaving them with what may feel like the only choice they have is to dissociate from who they truly are while fighting for survival. For me, the severe bullying began in 5th grade, and the extreme bullying began my senior year. I blocked most of the worst of the trauma for many, many years. But what I have to say, today it's the same shit in a different decade, where bullying is now legally mandated at the levels of federal, state, county, government, school districts. Sometimes it just feels like a fight to simply love oneself, and it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a sad reality.
Yeah. So I think this leads very nicely into the next question here. So how do systems of oppression centering cisgender and or heterosexual identities contribute to dissociative experiences for persons who identify outside the binary narratives in their gender identity and or sexual orientation?
Okay. So the current accepted social construction of gender is binary, male, female. And sexual orientation, the only option out there is heterosexual. That is the dominant narrative that we keep working on deconstructing because it's a false narrative. First of all, biology dictates otherwise. Biologically, there's a spectrum. Another author that I like and I use heavily in the work that I do is Diane Ehrensaft. She's the author of Gender Creative Child, a clinical psychologist specializing in gender care. And she's taken and crafted with colleagues what is called the gender web. It's an adaptive social construction of gender, moving away from a binary narrative that talks about nature, nurture, culture. So nature would be your chromosomes, et cetera, or as I like to summarize it in the immortal words of Saint Lady Gaga, born this way. Love Gaga.
Absolutely.
Nurture is the family, the church, the school. Culture would be your laws. And the other factor in there is time. So each individual sorts through the gender web in their own path. What she also writes about is gender by location and gender by season. And she has some other categories of the gender creative ways that children sort through who they are to push against the social construction. As I looked at gender location and gender by season, and let me give you an illustration. So gender by location is a kid who may be supported in their home. Sex assigned male wants to wear dresses. Dresses are only for girls, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. They're able to wear that in their home, but not in school. So that's a gender by location. The flip side of that is a kid may not be safe enough in the home, but in the school, they get to be affirmed by name and pronouns. So gender by location. If we look at systems of oppression and look at how they can play out, the more fragmented and partitioned a little kiddo it has to be to find places of authenticity, the more likely they're going to dissociate, particularly when you layer in adverse childhood experiences, either the original Kaiser Permanente or the contemporary Philadelphia ACEs. So you'll see an increase of complex PTSD experiences, OSDD, DID. But many of these kids are going to get misdiagnosed as bipolar, borderline, treatment-resistant major depression. I love that one. Oppositionally defiant, even OCD. So earlier this year, when I was at a middle school at a Gender Sexuality Alliance, to give you kind of illustration, putting it all together, there were 12 kids in the group. 11 identified lesbian, gay, bi, pan. 10 identified as BIPOC. 3 identified as trans. 1 kid identified as DID, and I believe them. Only 1 kid was out to parents. All identified struggling with SI, suicidal ideation, suicidal harm, while experiencing bullying. These kiddos don't feel safe at home or in school, leading to them living into perpetual hypervigilance. Queer and trans kiddos on average self-identify 2 to 5 years before they tell another person. The less safe the environment, the longer it takes for them to come out, subsequently leading to, I believe, coping through adaptive dissociative responses to stay alive in those adverse experiences. And so I encourage clinicians, especially EMDR trained ones and trauma responsible ones, to really bring into their practice the wheel of power and privilege created by Sylvia Duckworth. Whenever you're working with clients whose intersecting identities may place them in the margins, ask yourself, am I doing all that is necessary to cultivate clinical space and therapeutic practices to help these folks feel safe enough here? Because that may be the only place they feel safe enough. I know I went on a while.
Oh, that's really good information and so important for our kiddos. Definitely.
Yeah.
Has your gender identity or sexual orientation affected your spirituality or religious affiliations?
I started calling myself a Trinitarian Universalist, which is something I made up while I was in seminary in the late 90s.
Love it.
And I didn't understand where I came up with Trinitarian Universalist, but I would summarize it that, my conscious awareness of the God of my understanding started out as triune, God, the parent, Jesus, Holy Spirit. But I'm a universalist because I believe all paths lead to the source of love. Today, I contextually understand why I identify this way. Parts of me identify and resonate with the teachings of Jesus. Parts of me resonate with the teachers such as Rabbi Kushner, Elie Wiesel, Viktor Frankl, Abraham Heschel. Parts of me resonate with the teachings of Buddha and Thich Nhat Hanh. So the reverse of your question is actually more true for me. My spirituality influenced the positive ways I embraced my gender identity, my sexual orientation, and with embracing every part of me that came into existence during a time of crisis.
I love that so much. And it makes sense, having a system, your different selves will have varying opinions and beliefs, and coming to acceptance of everyone and where they're at is all a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know for us that everything has been kind of flipped into chaos when we came out and got married. We grew up and attended right up until we were married, or even a little bit after we were married initially, attending the very conservative Church of Christ, and it kind of blew up, and it was like, I can't keep coming here. And we tried going to another congregation, and now there's such internal conflict inside between different selves that's like they don't want to go they don't want to go there, they don't want to go anywhere. And so now we have cells that are wanting to still go to the Church of Christ. And then we have cells that are like, screw everybody. We're going to go be a pagan occult witch. Like, yeah, it turned everything upside down, for our system.
Yeah, I see that. I see that as certainly very authentic and not uncommon. I mean, I sojourned through so many different spiritual religious communities my whole upbringing. Like, I could rattle off a dozen different denominational affiliations or experiences. But I will say that when I got involved with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in college, and I was actually the Christian DJ my senior year of college, which is kind of funny. And well, my closing song was "I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For." So that was my closing song every single set. And then, I moved to Baltimore to get my master's in social work. I go into the school. They have basically an back then it was called lesbian, gay, bisexual social worker group because it was the early 90s. And I was like, ooh, progressive school. And, that became a place for me to be able to come out. And so here I am driving the beltway of Baltimore going, oh God, this is what you've been trying to tell me. I'm a lesbian. I'm Mr. Baby Dyke. And so I finally found what I was looking for, my authentic self. Mm-hmm. Part 1.
Part 1, yes. And coming to terms, like having a dissociative disorder, right? So, we know our experiences with sexual orientation and gender identity when there's like many, many, many people mm-hmm. inside, so like how does having a dissociative disorder, particularly DID, affect the experience of gender and sexual orientation?
That is, when you meet a trans person, you meet a trans person. When you meet a person living with dissociative experiences, you meet every system is different. Everybody's different. And, some of the work I do is sitting with folks who think they've got a gender plan in place, and then through reflection and discovery kind of go, ooh, there's more going on inside of my head than I realize. And now I've got to resort what my gender affirming plan is. And so it's really sitting with people and making space for them to kind of explore that. It's not internal family systems, it's internal family therapy. So
I like it.
Yeah. When I went to get my MSW, I resonated with Virginia Satir and her family therapy model. So that shows up a lot in with the work that I do.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right. What precautions should a clinician and or a client with DID take before beginning hormone replacement therapies or having surgeries?
Hormone replacement therapies and having surgeries. Good question. So, have you heard of what is trending among Trump supporters known as Mar-a-Lago face?
No.
Yeah. It is a plastic surgery trend. None of those women are required to see a clinician to evaluate their mental health and wellness, nor are they required to present a letter to surgeons or health insurance seeking approval for the procedures for Mar-a-Lago face. Reviewing various studies on the different regret rates for other procedures, I thought I would highlight a few for you all. Right?
This will be enlightening.
Yeah. So 5 to 10% of folks regret breast augmentation. And this is for cisgender folks, heterosexual folks. 11 to 33% regret body contouring. Knee replacement, 10 to 20%. Rotator cuff, 10 to 15%. Getting a tattoo. particularly I would say these days a Harry Potter tattoo, have regret rates of 16%. So none of what I just discussed requires seeing a therapist to sign off on whether or not a person is allowed to get Dumbledore's Phoenix tattooed across their chest. Yet the regret rate for medically affirming, medically necessary treatment for transtastic folks is between 1% to 3%. With the highest reason for the regret rate seeking detransition is simply this: they're afraid for their life.
Wow.
That's
If
huge.
they weren't afraid for their life, it would probably be less than 1%.
Right. Such a low percentage compared to the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge difference. Like I don't know that the average person understands the what's the word I want to use, impact, or like how big of a difference it really is.
Mm-hmm. No, they don't know. And it's our job as clinicians to really, 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 really begin to educate. Therapists are not to be gatekeepers, period. Therapists need to educate themselves. If you call yourself affirming of the LGBT community, but you're not advocating, here's the very important distinction. Ally is your heart knows it's all good. Advocate means you've done the work. If you haven't done the work, if you haven't taken a course or a class or sought consultation from someone such as myself who centers WPATH standards of care, and WPATH means the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, then don't offer to write a letter. In fact, don't actually offer gender affirming care until you've had adequate trainings. And if you end up having a client who begins to come out, it's your responsibility to deepen your knowledge. Don't work outside of scope. So to kind of get back to your original question around, the clinician side of things, the client side of things is, consider, and we do this here at Transitions, like we like to kind of just say to folks, if you've never had a medical procedure or medication, there may be elements that could be trauma triggering for you. And so let's resource you with information on what you're going through so you can make the best experience out of it.
Very smart.
Yeah. So what are the challenges of having DID with multiple genders, various sexual orientations, and even various religious beliefs? How can a system reconcile some of these differences?
So in a very oversimplified reply, saying it is a challenge while there exists a breakdown in communication, basically. So internal communication is essential.
Yes, it is.
It's essential. I mentioned Virginia Satir and her family therapy model, also her change model. So Satir looked at communication patterns, dysfunctional versus congruent, centered self-worth as foundational, focused on growth and change, not pathology, not the medical model bullshit, weaving in experiential and humanistic techniques and recognizing the system's perspective balanced with individual emphasis. See, let's weave in some satire to internal family systems religious dogma. I have a thing here on this. So Jesus's first disciples, right here, we talk about the teachings of Jesus. So then the first disciples kind of interpreted things in such a way that they came up with these doctrines and stuff and cultivated that you had to go through a pope. Dick Schwartz came up with some really cool things with internal family system. And if you read Dick Schwartz's stuff, he talks about source. And some of his first disciples have interpreted his work, and they make you say you've got to go through the self. So working through the Pope or working through the self. You follow?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So for some people, going through the Pope is really cool. That works for them. And for some, going through the self really works for them. But all systems are different. We have multiple spiritual pathways to take. Don't dogmatic anything. Clinicians, please work with an entire system. All parts that show up for therapy and all parts ready to be known, who trust enough the process to do internal family therapy. So let me give you an illustration. Had a client come in. We were doing Zimmerman's version of 4 blinks, right? They say, hey, I said, are you ready? And they're like, yeah, everybody's here. I'm like, oh, yeah, we all have something to work on. Okay, I guess we're doing group 4 blinks. Let me frame this out, though. If any one of you is ready to be done, then we done. So everybody showing up for group 4 blinks has to be ready for each next step. And if any time someone's done, we're done. So we get some really good process going, right? And then they're like, ooh, I feel a little floaty. I think maybe I did too much. And I'm like, nope, you did just enough. We're done. We don't need to overthink internal family therapy.
Yeah. I'm reminded as you're talking here, like this reminder to work with the whole system, and everybody is welcome. I'm in a consult group, and one of the other clinicians made the comment about, I only will talk to the self or the host or the original. And I'm really proud of myself because I actually spoke up and I said my piece on it. I did not let that slide. But I think this is an important piece here too, especially when we're talking about a DID system and talking about important things like choosing, what choices are going to be made when it comes to who you're going to be in a relationship with, sexual orientation, gender identity, all of those things, like internal communication. Like everybody should be allowed to speak because we are all sharing the same body. We're all living one life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And please don't think about Fraser's table as only a table.
Right.
It can be around the campfire.
That's us.
There's just get out of boxes.
Yes.
Be creative and adaptive.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. It does not have to be a conference table.
Please, that's kind of boring.
That has never worked.
Pick something else.
Could be a
campfire and s'mores is what finally got all of us to actually show up to a meeting for the very first time. Was campfire in the woods at night with s'mores.
We have an indoor water park. It's fabulous.
Well, I think that's important for a clinician to listen to what is resonating as really positive space. If you've got a client sitting across from you and you hear things that they're doing, you incorporate what they do into what you do.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. How can a clinician help a client with DID identify their gender identity and sexual orientation?
Sometimes it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, dissociative experiences or gender identity and orientation? Well, so shame narratives around gender and dissociation in our culture are actually not surprisingly similar. I am not normal. I will never be accepted. I should hide my identities to avoid making others uncomfortable. It's really an existential crisis. So, I favor leaning into the probability that a client has experienced some degree of trauma in their life if they show up at this practice. And that led to some amount of suffering and those existential questions. And so clinicians really are, I believe, to be a guide on the journey. Cultivating space for discovery, helping the client grieve where whenever it's helpful, providing psychoeducation when essential, holding to, a metaphorical beacon of light pointing towards celebration. It's really important. If clinicians get stuck in the quagmire of negativity and, oh, you're broken and you're fragmented and this and that, you're supposed to be pointing towards a light of hope, healing from systemic oppressions and healing with new positive narratives while still living within these systems of oppression. That's the thing. It's a both and, it's a both and. Yeah. I'll pause there.
Yeah. Hi, dear friends.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We'd love to invite you to join Hearts Multiplied, our private online community for people living with a dissociative disorder, along with separate spaces for clinicians and supporters.
Inside Hearts Multiplied, we host live events just for you, including social hangouts, little story time, teen D&D campaigns, online gaming like Minecraft and Mario Kart, and vibrant message boards on topics like intimacy and OEA.
We also offer a supporters group and a clinical consultation group for therapists working with dissociative clients.
And we Garden System facilitate 8-week peer coaching groups where we work on internal communication and personalized healing goals.
To learn more and sign up, visit acoupleofmultiples.com. We'd love to have you.
I wonder, thinking about certain clients and things that are questioning. They're questioning what their gender is. They're questioning their sexual orientation, and they have DID. Like, you have cells that identify as male. You have cells that identify as female. You have cells that identify as non-binary. You've got cells that aren't even human. You've got cells that are heterosexual. You've got cells that are lesbian or gay, or like there's a variety of different things that show up in the system. And it's like when you're trying to sift through and answer that question of like, who am I, right? But like, it's not really I anyway, but like,
yeah, the rhetorical I.
The rhetorical, yeah.
Right.
So who are we? I think would be how I would put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like where do you even begin to start to untangle some of these questions?
I think with curiosity. A book that was really helpful for me around the existential was called The Courage to Suffer. So as I'm like going, oh, let me try to rule out DID. Oh, shit, I'm ruling it in. Everything I'm reading, I'm ruling it in. Damn it. The Courage to Suffer became a really good book for me. The authors are Tonegren and Tonegren. And actually, the book was published in February of 2020. I think it's the universal source of, here's a gift for you. We're going to go through a global pandemic. The Courage to Suffer is for you. Just saying. So they explore 4 areas of existential crisis: groundlessness, isolation, identity, and death, right? And for many of the clients that we work with who are queer, trans, lesbi, gay, bi, pan, ace, and or have dissociative experiences, those existential themes show up over and over again. And so what I've done is mirrored those existential crises with the 4 meanings of love found in Buddhist philosophy: compassion, loving kindness, appreciative joy, and equanimity. And then I throw in the power of hospitality and curiosity. So if we can cultivate compassion for the parts that, when someone says, I hate this part of me, compassion is a real helpful narrative to bring in. For someone, whether it's big P parts of self states or little P parts of ego states, not liking that little kid, that little children or child, loving kindness, if you had a little kiddo sitting across from you, what would you be doing right now? Well, I would, okay, well, they're in you. Be that way for you. And, of course, the equanimity is around resourcing a person so they can hold to co-consciousness and dual awareness, that ability to be with the suffering but not caught up in it. So, we find ourselves often living in margins and intersecting identities. And so we as clinicians can help clients learn a new narrative. Since language shapes culture and culture shapes language, it behooves us to bring forward narratives that can help an individual discover a new language and new parts of themselves in loving, just ways. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think curiosity is the best answer to be given for almost most questions.
I know, for real.
Yeah.
I'm getting curious.
Instead of judgmental.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, I'm curious. Hey, do you notice that you're sitting in a different chair today? Oh, I've never known you to do that before. Being curious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So you discussed in the chapter for the book, experiencing your arm shaking, and that you recognize that somatic experience as a clue to your trauma. How can others recognize when such physical feelings are actually somatic experiences related to trauma?
Be curious.
It's going to be our go-to.
Yep. Be curious is
That's my
now the
go-to.
new phrase.
Well, truly, the first time my arm shook was like not even 2 weeks after the cancer diagnosis. It actually was occurring when a friend of mine, of course, this was COVID, so it was virtual, was leading me through some guided meditation and breath work. Well, as soon as you start to quiet down the mind, things show up. And my arm started to shake. And I felt this intense shame. And I was like, this is bizarre. And I was caught up in feeling the shame. And it happened a few more times. And as it repeated itself, I was noticing the patterns of where it was happening. And so I just like to say to folks, you're always collecting data points. Data points on a graph. And as I noticed when the arm shook, it was always around the cancer treatment. And even when I got through radiation and it was just the regular appointments, things were getting worse. And, we were on a path. The therapist I was working with at the time, we were on this really good resource building, stabilization, grounding process. And then sometimes life, like a major trauma fucking trigger, blows it all out. What I learned from all of that experience is how to slow down with clients and having a client say, I'm all of a sudden, and they mention this body feeling. And they're like, I'm going to go to the doctor and get it checked out. Okay, you do that. And then, oh, it's still bugging me. Do you notice when it bothers you? Yeah. And then I start kind of drawing the dots for them. Like, okay, this happened and this and this. And I'm like, all right, so let me know how those tests go. And then I get this email. Damn it, Karla, you're right. You're always right.
Oh, connecting the dots.
Connecting the data points, being curious and being compassionate.
Yeah. And tracking, because you have to identify those triggers, and that such important clues to pay attention to when it happens.
For sure.
All right. What are some issues with using body scans for people with gender dysphoria and DID, and how can therapists overcome that challenge?
Well, for some clients, when the body may be the trauma, what do you do? I think it's important to check in with clients that have gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia and just simply ask, is it okay or not okay with a traditional body scan? And in fact, again, get outside of the box, be creative. Creative expressive art alternatives where we can give people other opportunities to kind of check in. Are you familiar with dissociative experience cards?
A little bit. I know of them.
Well, the dissociative experience cards, you can find them on Etsy. I'm giving a plug, but I don't get any kickback. They're just really incredibly awesome. They mimic the DAS too. And so there's two sets of them. One has pictures of faces and one doesn't. And what I do find is folks that track more of ego state little p parts, they're okay with the faces. And folks that are tracking more self states tend to like this set without the faces. But I'll take those cards and we'll just lay them out, and they'll go through, have you ever felt this? Have you never felt this? Have you felt this within the last 7 days? Which that can, where do you feel it? There's also inner experience cards. Are you familiar with them?
No.
Oh, the inner experience cards are rocking. They give images for, person can go through a deck of cards and they're like, what resonates with you? And so these are really helpful for clients that might have aphantasia or have trouble with just expressing. Like the pictures can help them. And so and every single client with dissociative experiences loves the inner experience cards, and they'll pull them out. And it's other ways to kind of help them connect. Encourage stimming. If you've got someone who wants to stim or needs to stim, a lot of trans and queer folk, higher percentage do have aphantasia, but they also have ADHD. And so if you just kind of open up space and let them tell you how they would like to check in, and instead of using the term body scan, just kind of say, what do you notice?
Yeah.
Yeah, because body scan might be triggering for some, just that phrase.
Yeah, medical trauma, it's a thing.
It is.
Yep.
Important to mention. So how can singlet clinicians, that is clinicians that don't have DID or a system, a plural system, how can they reframe the narrative that plural systems, those of us living with multiplicity, are broken? I am not broken. Like, I just really want to emphasize I'm not broken, but okay, yes.
Well, I have created a 1-page little handout that I want to keep expanding on. And maybe someday I'll actually do a whole little workshop on, language shapes culture, culture shapes language, dissociative experiences reframed. But I'll share a little bit with you of like narratives that I've shifted. So first of all, I just hate the phrase haunted self.
Me too.
I think it's pretty, I'll censor myself. I just don't like it.
You're allowed to have an opinion.
The haunted self reminds me of cisgender heterosexual people talking about homosexuals.
People that don't know what it's like, trying to tell everybody what it's like.
Yeah. But notice I use the word homosexual. That is, that word comes out of a history of being an identifier for mental illness. Okay. So when we use words that support the medical model and support clinician doctor-centered care rather than client-centered care. If we focus on client-centered care, so let me kind of give you some illustrations on moving from clinician-centered medical model, client-centered resiliency building, positive and affirming. Dissociative identity disorder to a dissociative identity response, right? The person with the disorder, right? We love to use that word disorder. The disordered perpetrator and systems of oppression, okay? Fragmented self. Resilient and resourceful system. Survived trauma, thrived despite the trauma.
Right.
Developed maladaptive behaviors. Adaptive in the moment of distress.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ones that aren't adaptive in the moment of distress, they don't live.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Changing maladaptive behaviors. Learning adaptive coping in the present time. Learning new skills.
Yeah.
Alters the ANP and EP.
Oh, the worst terms ever.
Yeah. How about headmates, parts, insiders, inner team?
Yep. We say selves.
Yeah, selves.
Go team.
Yes.
Go team. Hey, insiders.
Yeah.
How can EMDR trained therapists install positive cognitions when they use a negative narrative in the work?
Ooh, say that again.
How can EMDR trained therapists, certified therapists, do the positive cognitions and healing work, the adaptive information processing, when they use negative narratives? You can still lean into evidence-based research and translate it for all communities.
Yes.
That's right. Beautiful.
Ooh, love it. Yeah. We look at people who have survived horrific traumas sometimes and developed these adaptive, I didn't say that right, adaptive, ways of surviving and thriving despite everything that happened. And then we pathologize it.
Yeah.
When it wasn't a negative thing.
Right. And
Well, there's a hypocrisy there too, because the ones that are quickest to do the labeling and the judging are it's the whole love the sin or hate the sin kind of narrative. Like, you're the one that we need to fix, but you're not looking at yourself. Jesus and the whole camel in the eye and the needle and all of that. It's quite simply, a therapist can only take a client as far as they take themselves. And sometimes I think some of the therapists that I run into in social settings, I'm kind of like, are you doing the work? Are you doing the work for yourself? Because I can actually feel your energy. You have to really be tuned into inner energy for that communication. And the more you kind of tune in and connect with your own energy, you can read other people's energies. Is this making sense?
yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, sometimes I'm curious, do you need a new therapist? Because, are you in therapy? And to doctors, have you been in therapy? Like, we all went through COVID. What are you doing to take care of yourselves so the medical model doesn't dominate your cardiac experience?
I think it's a really good reminder for a lot of people to know that a lot of the things that we see that we try to pathologize are actually normal reactions to the crazy stuff happening to us.
For sure. And Um, clearing my throat. Let me talk a minute. So we're living in challenging times right now. And
That's an
dissociating,
under.
and dissociating is a popular way of coping, from adaptive to maladaptive.
Yeah.
Social media doom scrolling, being a workaholic, shopaholic, substances of one form or another. It's not just queer folks or plural folks that are in this experience. Many individuals are isolating from others or only socializing with like-minded folks. And that's kind of pulling our nation apart in big maladaptive dissociative narratives of what is needed, and what we should do and who's okay and who's not okay. And really, what we need to be doing is building bridges. We're pulling apart literally at the seams. If you think of the United States as one big fragmented system that hasn't started any therapy,
I love that.
That's a great picture.
Yes. So true.
yeah. So
Time for some internal communication, right?
Ding, ding,
that's
ding.
what I'm talking about. We cannot villainize another. When we work with folks that have parts that they hate or dislike, they're living with everybody all the time. And really helping folks that have internal conflict, find common ground, find compassion, be curious and get to know each other. Those are really principles that we need to be practicing externally.
Agreed.
Preach it.
Yeah, okay. A little reverend came out.
And we love it.
It's all good.
All right. So I'm super, super excited to ask you this question.
Okay.
What has been the most significant factor in achieving inner peace and spiritual well-being?
Well, I believe the God of my understanding is within my system. Yeah. The source of love is found within. Moments when we were in the real deep hard work, and seeing things and experiencing things, we also discovered God was there with us the whole time. That we weren't alone in our suffering. And theologically, that is sound in many ways. And that is my lived experience. Some of the severe bullying that I experienced, I don't know how I lived until I started learning more about what I've been through and how God is with me. And then I realized that I lived through everything because God was always there with me. It's a deep passion of mine to help everybody find the God of their understanding within, however that sounds or looks. Carter Hayward, I love Carter Hayward. She wrote a book. She wrote several books. She was one of the first 11 female Episcopal priests, ordained Episcopal priest. The book is called Saving Jesus from Those Who Are Right. I'm going to read the title again. Saving Jesus from Those Who Are Right. For God is nothing other than the eternally creative source of our relational power. Say that again. God is nothing other than the eternally creative source of our relational power, our common strength. A God whose movement is to empower, bringing us into our own together. A God whose name in history is love. The language of many cultures and many peoples across millennia always come back to the source of love.
I think that's a really good point, especially thinking about people who have been through spiritual and religious abuse, trauma, maybe even been part of a cult, all of these things that have come down, in the teachings, even thinking of myself, like I don't want to go anywhere right now.
Yeah.
Like how can someone who's experienced spiritual or religious abuse heal from some of these experiences?
Mm-hmm. Trauma happens in relationship breaches, and healing happens in relationship repair. And love is the answer. That is the most succinct.
It is.
Being able
It's
to
simple.
it is, but to tease out that, to be curious.
Yeah.
Did the breach happen in spiritual or religious? Being able to separate the spiritual from the religious. Because the spiritual is universal. The religious is power dynamics. And if we can begin to kind of help someone separate each part that carries their own experiences, to be able to help build that bridge of a narrative that has them leave behind the religious trauma and walk towards whatever spiritual energy, insight, or creativity that feels safe enough.
Yes. I mean, that's exactly what I did to get through what I went through as a child. I relate so much with what you said to the previous question. I mean, if a child could internalize their perpetrator, they also can internalize the things that they took in to help them. And for me, I did have a constant conversation with God, which it was a loving thing for me. And that's why I developed angels in my system. It became a part of my system, just like the other things did. And it got me through, and it made me want to live because I had love there too.
Yeah.
So
I believe that every living energy has the source of love within it. And in fact, if you think about it, and this is more of a Thich Nhat Hanh thing, so let me give credit where credit is due. There is nothing in my organic makeup that is unique or original. Everything has been repurposed. In our bodies, we hold material that formed other bodies, that formed other life forms, that everything is recycled and repurposed. We are all connected. The one thing that's unique to each of us is that spark, that spirit, that energy. And that lasts beyond the organic. And that is where I think, if we can help each living energy connect with that. If we just look at some animals, they do it already. Like dogs just do.
animals are so smart.
Yes, they are.
All right. How can people follow you and your work?
Oh, well, I have been busy working on getting some things together. So I'm really excited that on August 24th, I was able to pull in Reverend Alex Amir to join with me. An Infinite Mind Healing Together speaker series. Calling All Saviors, Follow the Moon, where we actually do a little bit of a deeper dive into the 4 principles of Buddhist love and the courage to suffer with some expressive arts. So that's something that's coming up really soon. The Several of us that are authors in Queering EMDR are going to be at a panel at the MDiv conference in September. And I'll be on that panel. Through the Institute for Creative Mindfulness, Roshni Chabra, who's the editor of Queering EMDR, is the lead trainer. And I'm really excited to be a practicum facilitator for the EMDR training, which will be virtual, focusing on LGBTQ. And I am also a consultant and trainer now, so I'm really looking forward to being able to do some consulting with some folks that come through that training, or maybe hear about me through, I don't know, a podcast or something. I know, right? And in October, I'm going to be repeating a virtual 3.5-hour ethics training through NASW Delaware, West Virginia chapter on best practices serving the LGBTQ community, personal values, and professional ethics and conversations. So those are some things that are coming up. But, you know, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook, but if you really want to follow what's happening, search for Transitions Delaware, the name of my practice, in Wilmington, Delaware. Transitions Delaware is on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook, or just visit transitionsde.com, which is our website, and, you know, look me up there.
Very
Love
good.
it.
All right. So what is one last thought that you would like to leave our listeners today?
I'm actually feeling a moment of emotion. I didn't expect that.
What are you feeling?
There's a lot of people in the queerific and transtastic community, and or the dissociative community, that feel very alone.
Yeah.
You are not alone. You're going to be tempted to isolate and stay hidden. Find your people. If you're listening to this podcast, you found some of your people. You know, I actually have referred several of my clients to
Thank you.
Hearts Multiplied. You know, that safe space to be. I really encourage clients within the practice to join our social networks that are around here. You know, right now is not the time to be alone.
No.
Because you need to be with others. That's where healing happens. And that's where you need to hear someone say, you're fucking awesome.
That's right.
You're amazing. You're incredible. You have superpowers. Honey, you're gorgeous.
Yes.
And you have so much that's needed in this world to make it a better place. I need you to keep on keeping on.
Beautiful. Yes. Wow. Community is healing. We need community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to build bridges within and without.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and insight and wisdom. I know many people out there are now super excited to read your contributions in the upcoming book, Queering EMDR Therapy. We can't wait. Thank you again for being with us here today.
It is such an honor and a privilege to be with you. Thank you for the invite, and thank you for all that you're doing to bring positivity, beauty, love, and community into our world. Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right. And thank you, dear listeners, for hanging out with
a trio of multiples.
Yay.
This episode is brought to you by Donna Earle, a licensed professional counselor and certified clinical trauma professional.
She's the founder of To Life, Counseling in Southlake, Texas, where she helps individuals ages 17 and up heal trauma, navigate identity, and reclaim inner peace. Her trauma-informed approach includes EMDR, parts work, strengths-based therapy, TBRI, and CBT.
She's passionate about honoring the resilience of the human spirit, one story at a time. Today's episode is brought to you by
Healing Selves Therapeutics, PLLC, a mental health practice located in North Carolina, specializing in the treatment of dissociative disorders and trauma. Healing Selves is committed to serving the plural population through the utilization of EMDR, clinical hypnosis, expressive arts therapy, and other evidence-based practices.
Healing Selves was established in 2019 and currently serves North Carolina and Florida. We are committed to extending accessibility and currently accept most commercial insurances, Medicaid, and Medicare. Thank you, dear friends, for spending time with us today.
We're so grateful for each of you and all the important work you're doing. Whether it's supporting others or navigating your own healing journey, we hope this episode brought insight, encouragement, and something new to consider.
If it did, we'd love for you to share it with a friend, your therapist, psychiatrist, or colleagues. It's one more step toward changing how the world understands DID.
And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for therapy. Listening does not create a therapeutic relationship with the hosts or any guest speakers.
Until next time, take gentle care and thank you for hanging out with
A couple of multiples.